comfort feels harmless. It feels earned. It feels like the reward for surviving stress, effort, and responsibility. And that's exactly why it's dangerous, because comfort doesn't announce itself as a threat. It arrives quietly, wrapped in convenience, efficiency, and relief. And while it feels good in the moment, it slowly teaches your brain a lesson it was never designed to learn, that effort is optional, that challenge is unnecessary, and that avoidance is safe. The human brain did not evolve in environments built for ease. It evolved under pressure, uncertainty, and constant demand for adaptation. For most of human history, comfort was temporary. It was a pause between challenges, not a permanent state. But modern life has reversed that equation. Today, comfort is continuous, and challenge is something we have to actively seek. This shift matters more than most people realize because the brain learns from what it repeatedly experiences. And what it experiences now is ease without effort, reward without struggle, stimulation without cost. Every time you choose comfort over challenge, something subtle happens. The brain registers relief as success. Avoidance is rewarded. The neural systems responsible for resilience, focus, and long-term planning are left unused. Not broken, not damaged, just idle. And like any unused system, they begin to weaken. Over time, effort starts to feel heavier than it should. Discomfort feels intolerable. Progress feels exhausting, not because you've changed, because your brain has been trained away from the conditions that once made growth normal. This is why comfort is not neutral. It is instructional. It teaches the brain what to expect and what to avoid. When comfort becomes the default, the future quietly shrinks. Risk is postponed. Skills plateau. Potential remains theoretical, and none of this happens dramatically. There is no clear moment where everything collapses, just a slow narrowing of what feels possible, driven by habits that feel reasonable and choices that feel justified. Understanding this is not about rejecting comfort entirely or glorifying suffering. It's about recognizing that a brain designed for challenge cannot stay sharp, motivated, or fulfilled in an environment that constantly removes friction. The science is clear. Growth requires resistance, adaptation requires stress, and a future that expands rather than contracts require the willingness to step outside ease before it hardens into limitation. Comfort may feel like rest, but when it becomes permanent, it stops being recovery and starts becoming retreat. Comfort operates through one of the most powerful systems in the human brain, dopamine-driven learning. Dopamine is often misunderstood as a pleasure chemical, but its real function is to reinforce behavior by signaling what should be repeated. When an action leads to relief, ease, or immediate reward, dopamine marks that action as valuable. Comfort fits perfectly into the system. Every time you avoid effort, delay a difficult task, or choose the easiest available option, the brain experiences a small reduction in stress. That reduction is interpreted as success. Dopamine is released not because you achieved something meaningful, but because you escaped discomfort. Over time, this trains the brain to associate avoidance with reward and effort with threat. This learning process happens automatically. The brain does not evaluate whether the reward is beneficial in the long term. It only registers that a certain behavior reduced tension or delivered immediate gratification. In environments where comfort is abundant, this creates a powerful feedback loop. The more often you choose ease, the more your brain expects it. Tasks that require sustained effort, patience, or uncertainty begin to feel disproportionately difficult because they violate the brain's updated expectations. The discomfort associated with effort becomes amplified, not because the task itself is harder, but because the brain has been conditioned to expect constant relief. The dopamine trap of comfort is especially effective because it disguises itself as self-care, efficiency, or rational decision-making. Skipping effort feels sensible. Choosing convenience feels smart. Avoiding discomfort feels protective. But neurologically, these choices all reinforce the same pattern. Effort is unnecessary, and relief is the goal. Each repetition strengthens neural pathways that prioritize short-term comfort over long-term reward. The brain becomes increasingly sensitive to discomfort and increasingly motivated to eliminate it as quickly as possible. This sensitivity creates a narrowing of behavior. Risk is avoided, challenges are postponed. Novelty is filtered through the question of ease rather than opportunity. What makes this trap particularly dangerous is that it operates below conscious awareness. People rarely notice the moment when comfort begins to dominate decision-making. There is no dramatic shift, only a gradual recalibration of what feels tolerable. Activities that once felt manageable start to feel draining. Waiting feels intolerable. Boredom becomes something to escape immediately. These reactions are not signs of weakness. They are predictable outcomes of dopamine conditioning. The brain has learned that discomfort should be resolved instantly, and when it is not, it interprets the situation as abnormal or threatening. This conditioning also affects motivation. Dopamine is essential for pursuing goals, but when it is consistently released for avoidance, it loses its role as a driver of effort. Long-term goals become less compelling because they do not offer immediate relief. The brain struggles to generate motivation for activities whose rewards are delayed or uncertain. This leads to procrastination not as a moral failure, but as a learned response. The brain delays effort because it has been taught that relief is always available elsewhere. Comfort becomes the competing reward that undermines progress. Another layer of this trap is predictability. Comfort is reliable. It offers consistent, low effort rewards. The brain prefers predictability because it reduces uncertainty. Over time, this preference biases decision making toward familiar, easy options even when they are suboptimal. Growth, by contrast, is unpredictable. It involves trial, error, and discomfort. When the brain is conditioned by comfort, unpredictability feels threatening rather than exciting. This shifts behavior away from exploration and toward repetition, reinforcing stagnation. The dopamine system does not distinguish between healthy rest and chronic avoidance. Rest is meant to restore the capacity for effort, but comfort without subsequent challenge becomes avoidance. The brain cannot tell the difference unless effort follows. When rest is not paired with re-engagement, the system learns that rest itself is the endpoint. This blurs the line between recovery and retreat. Over time, the capacity to re-engage diminishes and rest becomes another form of escape. Modern environments intensify this trap by offering endless sources of comfort that require minimal effort. Digital stimulation, passive entertainment, and automated conveniences provide constant opportunities for dopamine release without challenge. Each of these reinforces the same learning pattern. The brain adapts by becoming efficient at seeking relief and inefficient at tolerating effort. This adaptation feels like a loss of discipline, but it is actually a shift in training. The brain has been trained for comfort, not for growth. Breaking the dopamine trap does not require eliminating comfort entirely. It requires restoring the balance between reward and effort. Dopamine must be reassociated with challenge rather than avoidance. This happens when effort is followed by meaningful outcomes and when discomfort is not immediately resolved. Allowing discomfort to exist without escape teaches the brain that it is not dangerous. Over time, this recalibrates dopamine signaling. Effort becomes associated with reward again, and comfort loses its dominance. The critical insight is that comfort is not neutral. It is a teacher. It teaches the brain what to seek and what to avoid. When comfort becomes the primary reward, the future is shaped by avoidance. Skills remain undeveloped. Goals remain distant. Potential remains theoretical. The dopamine trap does not destroy ability outright, but it redirects learning away from the behaviors that build a future and toward those that preserve the present, quietly reinforcing a pattern where ease is chosen repeatedly until challenge feels foreign and effort feels optional. The human brain is a product of evolutionary pressures that favored survival in harsh, uncertain environments, not comfort, predictability, or constant stimulation. For most of human history, life required effort by default. Food had to be found, shelters built, dangers navigated, and social bonds maintained through direct interaction and cooperation. These conditions shaped a brain that expects challenge and uses difficulty as a signal for engagement. Stress, effort, and uncertainty were not exceptions. They were the background against which daily life unfolded. Self-control, focus, and persistence evolved as adaptive tools to manage scarcity, delay gratification, and pursue long-term outcomes in environments where immediate rewards were rare and unreliable. Modern life represents a radical departure from those conditions. Comfort is no longer occasional, it is continuous. Food is abundant, movement is optional, information is instant, and entertainment is endless. The brain, however, has not evolved to match this pace of environmental change. Evolution operates slowly over thousands of generations, while technology has transformed living conditions in a matter of decades. This creates a mismatch between the brain's expectations and the reality it now inhabits. Systems designed to help us pursue rewards and conserve energy in scarce environments are now surrounded by effortless rewards that require no meaningful investment. The brain's reward circuitry is particularly affected by this mismatch. In ancestral settings, dopamine spikes were tied to behaviors that improved survival, such as successful hunts, problem solving, or social cooperation. These rewards required sustained effort and often came after long delays. Today, the same circuitry is activated by trivial stimuli that carry no survival value. A notification, a video, or a convenience feature delivers a dopamine response without requiring challenge or patience. The brain interprets these signals as success, even though nothing of substance has been accomplished. Over time, this trains the brain to expect rewards without effort and to perceive effort as unnecessary or even threatening. This mismatch also alters how stress is processed. Historically, stress was intermittent and tied to real threats or opportunities. The stress response mobilized energy and sharpened focus, preparing the body and mind for action. After the challenge passed, recovery followed. In modern environments, stress is often chronic but low grade, driven by constant stimulation, social comparison, and cognitive overload rather than physical demands. At the same time, many of the physical outlets that once helped regulate stress are absent. The result is a nervous system that remains activated without resolution, making effort feel exhausting and discomfort feel intolerable. Another consequence of this mismatch is the erosion of adaptive discomfort. Discomfort once served as information, signaling hunger, danger, or the need for action. Today, discomfort is treated as a problem to be eliminated immediately. Climate control, convenience services, and digital distractions remove friction from daily life. While this increases comfort, it also removes the signals that once prompted adaptation. The brain learns that discomfort is abnormal and should be avoided rather than tolerated and used as a guide. This shift weakens the ability to persist through difficulty because the brain no longer interprets discomfort as a meaningful or necessary state. Social dynamics have also been transformed in ways that amplify the mismatch. Ancestral social environments were small, stable, and face to face. Reputation was built through consistent behavior over time. Modern social environments are large, transient, and mediated by technology. Feedback is immediate, frequent, and often detached from meaningful action. The brain's sensitivity to social signals, once crucial for survival, is now exploited by platforms that provide constant evaluation. This pulls attention outward and reinforces short-term validation over long-term effort. The drive to maintain social standing becomes decoupled from productive behavior, further weakening self-regulation. The concept of effort itself has been reshaped by modern convenience. Many tasks that once required patience and skill are now automated. While efficiency increases, opportunities for incidental training of self-control decrease. The brain adapts to lower demands by reducing regulatory capacity. This does not mean the brain loses its ability to exert control, but that it is rarely asked to. When demands suddenly increase, the system feels underprepared, creating the illusion that discipline has declined. In reality, the conditions that once maintained it have been removed. Understanding this evolutionary mismatch reframes the struggle with comfort and self-control. It explains why ease feels so compelling and why resistance feels unnatural. The brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do: conserve energy and seek reward. The problem is not the brain, but the environment. When the environment provides rewards without effort, the brain adapts accordingly. This adaptation is not a failure of character, but a predictable outcome of repeated exposure to conditions that differ radically from those under which regulatory systems evolved. Addressing this mismatch requires intentional reintroduction of challenge. Because modern environments no longer demand effort by default, effort must be chosen deliberately. This does not mean rejecting technology or comfort entirely, but recognizing that a brain built for challenge needs regular exposure to friction to function optimally. Activities that involve physical exertion, delayed gratification, sustained focus, and uncertainty help realign brain systems with their original purpose. These experiences signal to the brain that effort is still relevant and that discomfort is not only tolerable but meaningful. When people understand that their difficulty with self-control is rooted in evolutionary mismatch rather than personal inadequacy, the approach to change becomes more strategic and less emotional. Instead of relying on motivation or willpower, they can focus on designing conditions that restore balance between effort and reward. The brain remains plastic and responsive throughout life. By gradually shifting the environment to include more challenge and less automatic comfort, it is possible to retrain regulatory systems and rebuild the capacities that once emerged naturally under harsher conditions, allowing self-control, focus, and resilience to reemerge not as forced traits but as natural responses to an environment that once again demands them. Avoidance is not a neutral response to discomfort. It is a form of learning. Every time the brain encounters something difficult and chooses to retreat, it updates its internal model of the world. It learns what to approach and what to escape. This learning happens automatically without conscious reflection because the brain is constantly trying to minimize perceived threat and maximize efficiency. When discomfort is avoided, the immediate reduction in stress is registered as a successful outcome. That success signal reinforces the behavior that produced it. Over time, avoidance becomes the default strategy, not because the person prefers stagnation, but because the brain has been trained to associate withdrawal with safety. This process is subtle and incremental. No single act of avoidance reshapes behavior in a dramatic way. The change happens through repetition. Each time a difficult conversation is postponed, a challenging task is delayed, or an uncomfortable emotion is numbed, the brain strengthens the neural pathways that support retreat. These pathways become more efficient with use. Eventually, the urge to avoid arises faster and with greater intensity, often before conscious thought has a chance to intervene. What feels like a lack of willpower is actually the expression of a well-trained avoidance system doing exactly what it has learned to do. The brain's learning mechanisms do not evaluate long-term consequences. They operate on immediate feedback. If avoiding discomfort produces relief now, the behavior is reinforced, even if it leads to regret or limitation later. This is why avoidance is such a powerful force in shaping behavior. The costs are delayed and abstract, while the benefits are immediate and tangible. Over time, this imbalance skews decision-making towards short-term relief at the expense of long-term growth. The future becomes less influential because the brain has learned that present discomfort can always be escaped. Avoidance also changes how discomfort itself is perceived. When discomfort is consistently escaped, the brain never has the opportunity to learn that it is survivable. As a result, discomfort feels increasingly threatening. Small challenges begin to produce disproportionate emotional responses. Tasks that require sustained effort feel overwhelming. This escalation is not because the tasks have become harder, but because tolerance has decreased. The brain has learned that discomfort is something to be eliminated, not endured. This learning narrows the range of experiences the person feels capable of handling, gradually shrinking their behavioral repertoire. This narrowing has cascading effects. Skills develop through exposure to difficulty. When avoidance limits exposure, skill acquisition slows or stops. Confidence, which is built through successful engagement with challenge, fails to develop. The absence of these reinforcing experiences further strengthens avoidance, creating a self-perpetuating cycle. The person avoids because they feel incapable, and they feel incapable because they avoid. From the outside, this may look like laziness or fear, but at the neurological level, it is a predictable outcome of learning driven by relief-seeking behavior. Avoidance also reshapes attention. When the brain is trained to scan for opportunities to escape discomfort, attention becomes biased toward threat detection rather than goal pursuit. The mind becomes preoccupied with identifying potential difficulties, obstacles, or sources of stress. This vigilance consumes cognitive resources and reduces the capacity for focused engagement. Even when engaging in tasks, attention is divided between the activity and the anticipation of discomfort. This divided state makes effort feel more taxing and less rewarding, reinforcing the desire to disengage. Social contexts amplify avoidance learning. Many forms of discomfort involve social evaluation, uncertainty, or potential rejection. Avoiding these situations produces immediate relief from anxiety, which strongly reinforces the behavior. Over time, the brain generalizes this learning, treating a wide range of social challenges as threats to be avoided. This generalization limits opportunities for connection, collaboration, and growth. The person may rationalize avoidance as preference or introversion, but the underlying mechanism is the same. Relief has been rewarded repeatedly, and engagement has not. Modern environments provide endless tools for avoidance, making this learning process more efficient. Digital distractions, passive entertainment, and constant stimulation offer immediate escape from boredom, frustration, or effort. Each time discomfort arises, an easy alternative is available. The brain learns quickly under these conditions because the feedback loop is tight and reliable. Discomfort appears, avoidance follows, relief is delivered. This loop trains the brain with remarkable efficiency, reinforcing patterns that prioritize escape over engagement. Avoidance does not only affect external behavior, it shapes internal regulation as well. Emotions that are avoided rather than processed tend to persist and intensify. The brain never learns that it can tolerate them, so it remains sensitive and reactive. This sensitivity increases the frequency of avoidance behaviors, extending the learning loop into emotional life. Over time, the person becomes less willing to experience discomfort of any kind, whether physical, emotional, or cognitive. This generalized avoidance further restricts growth and adaptability. Breaking the avoidance loop requires exposure, not force. The brain cannot be reasoned out of a pattern it learned through experience. It must be shown repeatedly that discomfort can be tolerated without catastrophic outcomes. Each time a person stays with difficulty instead of retreating, the brain receives new information. The absence of disaster weakens the association between discomfort and threat. Relief is no longer exclusively linked to avoidance. Over time, this new learning competes with and gradually overrides the old pattern. This process is slow because avoidance learning is deeply ingrained, but it is also reliable because the brain remains plastic. Small intentional exposures to discomfort are sufficient to initiate change. The key is consistency. Each exposure provides a data point that updates the brain's expectations. As tolerance increases, discomfort loses its power to dictate behavior. Engagement becomes more likely, and the range of possible actions expands. What once felt impossible becomes manageable, not because the person has changed in essence, but because the brain has been retrained to interpret discomfort as information rather than danger, gradually restoring the capacity to move toward challenge instead of away from it. Skill atrophy does not happen suddenly or dramatically. It happens quietly through no-news. The brain is an efficiency-driven organ. It strengthens what is used and weakens what is not. When capacities like focus, patience, emotional regulation, and persistence are not regularly demanded, the neural circuits that support them begin to lose efficiency. This is not decay in the sense of damage, it is reallocation. The brain redirects resources towards systems that are more frequently engaged. In environments dominated by ease and comfort, the systems that handle passive consumption and rapid reward become dominant, while those required for sustained effort gradually fall behind. Focus is one of the first skills to atrophy under conditions of constant ease. Deep attention evolved to solve complex problems and track long-term goals. It requires sustained engagement without immediate reward. When daily life is structured around short bursts of stimulation and quick relief from boredom, the brain adapts by favoring shallow attention. Switching becomes easier than staying. Over time, the capacity to hold attention on a single task weakens, not because of distraction itself, but because the brain has learned that disengagement is always an option. Tasks that require focus begin to feel uncomfortable because the neural support for that focus has been undertrained. Patience follows a similar trajectory. Waiting is a learned skill, not a personality trait. In environments where rewards are delayed, patience develops naturally because it is necessary. In environments where gratification is immediate, patience becomes unnecessary and therefore underdeveloped. The brain adapts by reducing tolerance for delay. Even short waiting periods can trigger frustration or restlessness. This impatience is not a moral failing, it is a predictable outcome of repeated exposure to immediacy. When patience is rarely practiced, the neural pathways that support it weaken, making long-term projects and delayed rewards feel disproportionately taxing. Emotional regulation is another capacity that suffers under excessive comfort. Regulation develops through exposure to manageable stress and the opportunity to recover without escape. When discomfort is consistently avoided or numbed, the brain never learns how to downregulate emotional responses effectively. Instead, it becomes reactive. Small stressors produce outsized emotional reactions because the regulatory systems have not been exercised. Comfort removes the need to practice regulation, and without practice, the skill deteriorates. Over time, emotional discomfort becomes something to eliminate rather than navigate, further reinforcing avoidance. Persistence is perhaps the most affected skill. Persistence requires tolerating effort without immediate payoff. It develops through repeated experiences of staying engaged despite difficulty. When life is structured to minimize friction, these experiences become rare. The brain learns that quitting is a viable and often rewarded option. Each time effort is abandoned in favor of comfort, the neural pattern supporting persistence weakens. Eventually, the threshold for quitting lowers. Tasks are abandoned not because they are impossible, but because the brain has not been trained to remain engaged in their presence. This atrophy is compounded by the illusion of capacity. Because comfort masks the absence of challenge, people often believe they still possess these skills until they are tested. The moment of testing reveals the gap. Focus feels elusive. Patience feels strained. Effort feels exhausting. This can be misinterpreted as a sudden loss of ability, when in reality it is the result of gradual underuse. The brain has not failed, it has adapted precisely to the demands placed upon it. The discomfort experienced during effort is a signal of this mismatch between current demands and recent training history. The modern emphasis on optimization and convenience accelerates this process. When systems are designed to reduce effort, they also reduce opportunities for skill maintenance. Navigation apps replace spatial reasoning. Automation replaces problem solving. Notifications replace internal cues for action. Each convenience saves time, but it also removes a small demand on the brain. Individually, these removals seem insignificant. Collectively, they create an environment where regulatory skills are rarely required. The brain responds by reallocating resources away from these systems, leading to a gradual erosion of capacity. Skill atrophy also affects identity. People often define themselves by what feels easy or difficult. As effortful activities become more uncomfortable, individuals may conclude that they are simply not suited for them. This belief reinforces avoidance, further reducing exposure and accelerating atrophy. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing. Comfort shapes behavior, behavior shapes neural capacity, and neural capacity shapes self-perception. Over time, the range of activities that feel accessible narrows, not because of fixed limitations, but because of accumulated adaptation to ease. Reversing skill atrophy does not require extreme measures, it requires reintroducing demand. The brain remains plastic, capable of strengthening circuits that are once again used. Focus improves when sustained attention is practiced regularly. Patience returns when delay is tolerated without escape. Emotional regulation strengthens when discomfort is experienced without immediate numbing. Persistence grows when effort is maintained despite the absence of instant reward. These changes occur gradually through repetition as the brain updates its allocation of resources based on new patterns of use. The critical point is that comfort does not simply make life easier, it reshapes the brain's priorities. Skills that are not demanded are not maintained. When ease becomes the default, the capacities that support growth quietly weaken. What feels like a personal limitation is often a reflection of environmental design. By understanding skill atrophy as an adaptive response rather than a failure, it becomes possible to approach change strategically, rebuilding capacity through deliberate exposure to effort and allowing the brain to relearn what it was originally designed to do under conditions that once made strength inevitable. Deliberate discomfort is not about seeking pain or rejecting ease for its own sake. It is about restoring the conditions under which the brain functions optimally. The nervous system evolved to adapt through exposure to manageable stress. When stress is absent, adaptation stalls. Deliberate discomfort reintroduces the signals the brain needs to recalibrate motivation, attention, and self control. It creates a contrast between effort and reward that modern environments often erase. Without that contrast, the brain loses its reference points and everything begins to feel flat, effortful, or meaningless. The brain learns through prediction and error. When discomfort is avoided, the brain predicts threat and never receives corrective feedback. When discomfort is deliberately entered and survived, prediction errors occur. The brain expected danger, but nothing catastrophic happened. This mismatch forces an update. Over time, repeated exposure to controlled discomfort reduces the brain's threat response and increases tolerance. What once triggered resistance begins to feel normal. This is not a change in personality, it is a recalibration of neural expectations. Deliberate discomfort works because it reconnects dopamine to effort. When effort precedes reward, dopamine signaling shifts from avoidance based relief to achievement based reinforcement. The brain relearns that effort is not something to escape, but something that leads somewhere. This relinking restores motivation in a way that external inspiration cannot. Motivation becomes endogenous rather than borrowed. It arises from the brain's renewed confidence that effort has value. Without this learning, motivation remains fragile, dependent on novelty or external pressure. Physical discomfort is one of the most direct ways to initiate this recalibration. Physical effort provides clear feedback and boundaries. The body learns quickly. Activities that elevate heart rate, require strength, or demand endurance signal the brain that stress can be tolerated and resolved through actions. This learning generalizes. Tolerance for physical discomfort often increases tolerance for cognitive and emotional discomfort as well. The brain does not compartmentalize these experiences as much as it seems. Stress is stress, and learning to remain engaged through it strengthens regulatory systems across domains. Cognitive discomfort is equally important. Sustained focus, problem solving, and delayed gratification all generate mental strain. In comfort dominated environments, this strain is often avoided through distraction. Deliberately staying with cognitive difficulty teaches the brain that attention can be maintained without immediate relief. Over time, focus becomes less effortful, not because tasks become easier, but because the brain has rebuilt the circuits required to support them. Mental endurance returns through use, just as physical endurance does. Emotional discomfort plays a critical role in this process. Emotions evolved as signals, not obstacles. When emotions are avoided or numbed, the brain never learns to regulate them. Deliberately allowing uncomfortable emotions to exist without immediate suppression teaches the nervous system that these states are temporary and survivable. This learning reduces reactivity. Emotional resilience increases not by eliminating discomfort, but by expanding tolerance. As tolerance grows, emotions lose their power to dictate behavior. Choices become less reactive and more intentional. Deliberate discomfort must be calibrated. Excessive stress overwhelms the system and reinforces avoidance. The goal is not to flood the brain with pain, but to provide manageable challenges that stretch capacity without breaking it. This mirrors the conditions under which adaptation evolved. Incremental increases in difficulty allow the brain to update expectations gradually. Each successful exposure builds confidence at a neural level. The brain becomes less alarmed by challenge because it is evidence that engagement leads to resolution rather than harm. Consistency matters more than intensity. Rare acts of extreme discomfort do little to retrain the brain if daily life remains dominated by ease. Regular exposure to small challenges is far more effective. Walking when convenience is available, delaying gratification when immediate reward is possible, engaging in difficult conversations rather than avoiding them all provide repeated signals that effort is normal. These signals accumulate. Over time, the brain relocates resources toward regulatory systems because they are once again in demand. Deliberate discomfort also reshapes identity indirectly. Identity follows behavior. When a person repeatedly chooses challenge over ease, the brain updates not only expectations but self-perception. Effort becomes part of what feels normal. This shift reduces the need for willpower because the behavior aligns with identity. The person is no longer forcing themselves to act against their nature. Their nature has been reshaped through repeated action. This is why sustainable change rarely comes from motivation alone. It comes from environments and behaviors that consistently reinforce a different learning pattern. Modern life does not naturally provide the conditions required for this recalibration. Comfort is the default, discomfort must be chosen. This choice is not a rejection of progress, but an adaptation to it. Technology has removed many of the pressures that once maintained regulatory strength. Deliberate discomfort reintroduces those pressures in a controlled way. It acts as a corrective mechanism, aligning the brain's learning systems with the demands of long-term growth rather than short-term relief. When discomfort is embraced intentionally, the future expands, capacity increases, effort feels meaningful again, the brain regains its ability to delay gratification, sustain focus, and regulate emotion. Comfort no longer dominates decision making because it is no longer the primary teacher. Challenge takes its place. And with repeated exposure to challenge, the brain relearns what it was designed to do, adapt, endure, and grow under pressure rather than retreat from it. Comfort never announces the moment it starts costing you your future. It doesn't arrive as a warning or a crisis. It arrives as ease, as relief, as something you feel you deserve. And that's why most people don't resist it. They drift into it slowly, believing nothing is being lost, until one day they realize their capacity for effort has quietly shrunk, their tolerance for difficulty has thinned, and the life they imagine now feels farther away than it should. The science makes something clear that motivation never could. Your brain is not broken. Your discipline was not lost. Your potential did not disappear. It adapted. It adapted to an environment that rewards avoidance, minimizes effort, and treats discomfort as a problem instead of a signal. What you feel now is not failure. It is feedback. The future is not shaped by comfort or intention, but by what you repeatedly train your brain to tolerate. Every moment of chosen ease teaches retreat. Every moment of chosen challenge teaches expansion. There is no neutral ground. The brain is always learning, always adjusting, always preparing you for the conditions you create. You don't need to reject comfort completely. You need to stop letting it be your teacher. Growth does not require suffering, but it does require friction. The willingness to stay present when something is difficult, the decision to resist escape when relief is available, the courage to allow discomfort to exist long enough for your brain to learn that it is not a threat. Your future will be built by what you choose in small, unremarkable moments, when no one is watching, when comfort is easiest, when quitting would feel reasonable. Those moments are not tests of character. They are training sessions. And whatever you train today is what will feel natural tomorrow.